This week, we're talking about 5 things you should always do when blood trailing an animal. Let's get right into it. So, number one, hold your horses. I know how exciting it is. I know that post shot feeling is the most amped up adrenaline rush you'll ever have. If you saw your arrow hit and you know it's perfect, I know what that's like. You just want to get after it and put your hands on it. If you saw your arrow hit and you know it wasn't perfect, maybe you saw it go through the guts or it's stuck into the shoulder, that can be the lowest of lows, knowing that you're going to have a long night ahead of you. But the one thing that you can do that is going to help you no matter what your shot looked like is hold your horses. Just wait. Unless I literally see the animal go down in sight, which is rare. It's happened, but it's rare. I will wait a minimum of 30 minutes. I go on my watch and I set a 30-minute timer and I don't move. That's if I know the shot looked good. If I'm not sure how the shot was, it's an hour. No questions asked. If it's getting close to last light and you don't want to deal with something in the dark, too bad. You're going to be dealing with it in the dark anyways. There's two main reasons for this. One is obviously give the animal a chance to actually die. And if you made a marginal shot, that can take a little bit of time. If you pursue too early, you're going to spook that animal up. And after you spook them, after they initially bed down, you're probably never going to find them. When an animal gets shot and they don't really know what happened, typically they just run until they feel safe and lay down. And once they lay down, they're going to stiffen up and they don't really want to move. And they're going to lay there and die if your shot was good enough. Typically, they don't run very far from the shot site because if they didn't know you were there, they don't really know what happened. But if you get out of the stand or the blind and you start pursuing them, all of a sudden they know they're being tracked and they are going to run and run and run. And you're not probably ever going to find them. The other reason is to let yourself calm down. When you get to the scene, you want to be very alert and aware and observational, and you want to be making really clear assessments of what you're seeing and what you need to do to find that animal. So you need to let that adrenaline come down a bit so that you can make better, smarter decisions. I was hunting in Mexico, Coues deer, which is this one right here. That was with the legendary bow hunter Frank Noska. And he told me something I'll never forget. He said, nobody has ever lost an animal by waiting too long. That's 100% true. Number two, treat it like a crime scene. So when you do go investigate the shot area and where everything took place, treat it like a crime scene. Don't walk up and start stomping all over the tracks. Don't walk up and start moving stuff around. Leave your arrow where it lays for a minute. Take pictures, pay attention to where those animals' tracks took off. You're going to be able to see in the dirt what running tracks look like versus walking tracks. But if you start walking all over it, you're not going to be able to have any of that information available to you. And if this turns into a difficult tracking job, all of that information is going to be crucial. So seriously, treat it like a crime scene. Don't touch any of the evidence. You might need it. If you find your animal and it didn't go far, that's the time to go back and check things out and really learn. And that's how you learn about blood tracking and trailing and how arrows kill animals, is by investigating this stuff after you know what's already happened. So definitely go do that after you know the outcome of the hunt, but don't start messing with the stuff at the scene of the shot until after. Number three, I do this a lot. Sniff your arrow. And if your arrow isn't present, sniff some other form of blood that you can see, whether it's on a leaf or a stick, pick it up and sniff it. You will have visual cues based on the blood as to what the shot was like. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I did a full arrow lethality, how animals actually die from arrows video with a surgeon who's also my dad. But he broke it down from a real medical perspective, and we talked about different types of blood, what liver blood looks like on an arrow versus lung blood versus a gut shot versus muscle shots and all that stuff. You need to understand these visual cues when you look at your arrow, and you need to be able to tell that type of blood indicates this type of shot. That's why I shoot white veins with a white arrow wrap, so I can see that stuff a little bit clearer. But if you learn what different types of blood smell like, you actually can get a much greater insight into the story. So I always pick up the arrow and smell it no matter what it looks like. Because a heart shot and a liver shot, those are both going to have kind of that thick, dark blood with full coverage on the arrow. But the heart shot is not really going to smell like anything. The liver shot's going to smell like guts. Two completely different stories. Liver shot, you need to back out and come back in the morning, or if it's a morning shot, then come back way later in the day. Heart shot, you're going to be good to pursue that animal right away. And the only way you can really tell the difference without a super trained eye is by smell. Any sort of foul smell on the arrow indicates that you went through the abdomen, which isn't necessarily bad. If you shot an animal quartering away, Even to get into the vitals, you're probably going to have to go through some of the abdomen. So it's just a matter of gathering as much information as you can visually based on what you saw when you shot, based on what you see at the scene, what type of blood you're seeing and how much of it. And that smell component can really tell you a lot. Number 4, pursue the blood trail as though you're still hunting. Doesn't matter what it looks like. Go slow, be careful, have an arrow nocked, pursue it like you're hunting, because you never know what might happen. That animal might be laying there looking like it's dead and it's not. And I'll tell you a real quick story about this Coues deer. I was in Mexico. I shot, thought it was a good shot, but he ran out of sight really quickly, so I waited an hour. I got out of the blind after an hour. I walked over this little hill I saw him go over. It was only 60 or 70 yards from the shot site, and I saw him laying there with his head down. Pumped up and excited, I walked up. I was probably 5 yards from him. I put my bow down, and this buck that I thought was dead looked up at me and ran right past me, almost knocked me over. I couldn't believe it. So I'm scrambling to get my bow together, my rangefinder. He ran out kind of into the open desert, stopped. I ranged. It was 60 some yards, and I'm trying to get my bow together. Thankfully, that little last sprint took his last bit of energy out of him, and he did the death wobble and fell. But I will never count on that happening again. What I should have done is been walking up with an arrow nocked, ready to go, so that I could get a shot off if something like that happened. Be a little bit more prepared than I was. I let my guard down too early. That's when Frank Noska told me no one's ever lost an animal by waiting too long. And he's right. And the last one is don't be afraid to back out and go home for the night. Sometimes you're going to find yourself in a situation where you know in your gut that you shouldn't pursue an animal. The blood isn't good. You didn't think your shot was good. You know you hit it in the guts. Whatever the case may be, there will be a time where your gut tells you to go home and don't pursue it. Please, I urge you, don't fall into the temptation of taking the gamble and hoping that you find it that night. It usually doesn't work out. I lost the biggest black bear that I've ever seen in person doing that. I made a marginal shot, went back to the truck for an hour, decided I couldn't wait any longer. This bear is so big. I hunted so hard for it. I had so many trail cam pictures of it. I had to go look that night, and I never found it. I could see where it had bedded and started to bleed out. It wasn't that far from the shot site, and I pushed it. That was a huge mistake that I'll never make again. I know the fear of going back for the night is you might come back and your deer, your elk, or whatever has been eaten by coyotes. And that happens. It happened to me too on a buck I shot a few years ago. I went back in the morning and the deer was basically completely eaten by coyotes. But if I didn't leave it that night, I probably never even would have recovered anything. So sometimes it's just not going to work out the way you had envisioned it, and you need to make the smartest decision regardless of how poor the result may be. Hope you guys learned something from this, and if there's any crucial blood trailing tips that you like that I didn't mention here, tell me about them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Maybe I'll throw them in a video down the road. Thank you guys so much for watching.